All right, so you guys are going to take a look at a CRQ, or what's called a constructed response question, about the topic we're wrapping up, and that is exploration. So the way our CRQ works is a CRQ is a series of documents. It's really two different documents that you work with, and you answer a series of questions about those documents. So for starters, there's two different documents. So the first document is either a text passage or a map, usually, or it can be an image. But what you have to do with the first document is you need to explain what the historical or geographic context is. That's a bunch of fancy language for how did this come to be? Okay. For example, if we show you a map of where all of the river valley civilizations were, and we kind of shade those areas, and we say explain the geographic context of this map, you would say, well, systematic agriculture and the domestication of animals led to river valley civilizations in the places shown on the map. First civilizations grew near river valleys because rivers were a source of food, water, transportation, irrigation, etc. Right? So that's how you would answer that kind of a question. You're explaining to the person who's grading it what that map is showing and why it's showing it, and how that condition has come to be. Okay. So the first document is always going to ask you a question similar to that. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's a text passage that says, in Sparta, the main focus of society was militarism. All male soldiers were, started training as soldiers from the age of 7 and dedicated their entire lives to the military. And the women helped run society while men were busy either at war or preparing for war. And that's your document. And maybe the question asks, how did this come to be, right? Explain the historic or geographic circumstances that led to this. And that's when you start talking about how Sparta was not surrounded by natural barriers that prevent invasion, so Spartan society had to focus on militarism as a means of defending itself. That's how you would answer that. Okay? So document 1 is always going to ask you basically, how did this come to be? Either this text passage or this map. Why is this happening, essentially? Document 2 is a different kind of question. It's always about the same kind of topic, okay? But it asks you a different kind of question. It asks you to consider the purpose or the bias, maybe, of a resource, or the point of view of the author of that resource. And that's what that question is always about. For example, if maybe document 2 is asking you, gives you a piece of the Code of Hammurabi, and it asks you to discuss the purpose of this document. We could say Hammurabi wrote this law code so that all people of his kingdom would know what are the laws that they live under, and also what are the values of this society that everyone takes very seriously. That's an explanation of the purpose of that document, right? So that's how you would go about answering this question. So 1 asks you about how that document or map came to be, and number 2 asks you more about the source. Where is this information coming from, and what does that mean? So this is about source reliability oftentimes, or sometimes about the purpose or audience of a particular document. In the case of the Code of Hammurabi, that's how we would kind of answer question number 2 for that document. Document 3, and I put 3 in quotes here. Document 3 asks you to examine both of those previous documents, 1 and 2, together and explain how they represent cause and effect or a turning point. Okay? So, for example, question number 3 might say, after looking at the map of the River Valley civilizations and examining the document of the Code of Hammurabi, explain how these two documents together represent a turning point in history. Okay? So use evidence from both documents in your response. That's a great example of what question number 3 could look like. in which case you would have to explain both of these together, the birth of civilization near river valleys and the development of law code, for example. How does this represent a turning point? Okay, this represents a turning point because people used to live Paleolithic lifestyles. They were nomads. They did not have permanent settlements. They chased food supply across the planet. Lifespans were short. Shelters were temporary. Technology was limited. And document 1 and 2 show the beginning of civilization. People settled in one particular area, learned how to perform purposeful agriculture, to support society, and eventually developed law codes and sophisticated political systems that enabled people to live peacefully together in society. This is an important turning point because before this, people lived a different way, and after this, people lived a new way. I mean, rudimentary explanation, but that's how you would answer document 3. So document 3 asks you to explain this topic as a whole. How is this a turning point? How is this a cause and effect? So that's pretty much how a CRQ works. That's how each question of a CRQ works, and that's how you kind of answer each of them depending on the topic.